Chapter 962. It was 9:00 in the morning in T-City. Yan Yonghua hurried from the Bitter Reef Laboratory to the central CBD of T-City, harboring a terrible impression and mood towards the shoddy researchers and so-called experts. It just so happened to be rush hour. The crowded flow of people and cars shuttled back and forth between the ground, the sky, and the buildings of the city. They were like bacteria breeding in a giant can. Under the monotonous mode of survival, there was a hidden restless power that could erupt and multiply at any time. Yan Yonghua was among them, but he quickly withdrew himself. He turned off the live broadcast, got out of the car, and entered a certain skyscraper. Under the guidance of his secretary, who was already waiting at the door, he took a private elevator and quickly went up to the top floor of the building, where the lighting was the best. Even in the central CBD, this was one of the highest points. The terrain, money, and power isolated the vast majority of the clamor. Yan Yonghua felt as if he had climbed out of a rotten can. It was as if he only needed to take one step and he would be able to completely escape. Then, he would throw the can into the trash can. Unfortunately, this was just an illusion brought about by his manic emotions. If psychological factors were excluded, this place could be called an excellent scenery. Looking down from a high vantage point, he could see the coastline not far away. He could see the seascape at the edge of the bustling area of the city until he exhausted his eyesight and blended into the grayish blue in the distance. But if he wanted to find the most valuable target on the coastline of T-City, even with the vision of an extraordinary, he might not be able to see through the disturbance of light in the atmosphere and see the actual scene. But Yan Yonghua's eyeballs turned slowly. There were two projection areas in the room, and they displayed clear images. One of them was displaying a young and familiar face in high-definition pixels. The corners of his eyes twitched. He didn't want to see it at all, but he had no other choice. He could only try his best to remain calm. But when he saw the real-time image cut out from the other projection area, he couldn't hold back any longer. Yan Yonghua pursed his lips and turned his face to the side. He would rather look at the kid Luo Nan than greet the person over there. Then again, the person on the other side was chattering endlessly. It seemed as if they didn't notice him. But the owner of the room pulled his gaze away from the projection area and laughed at him. Just in time. You father and son have met. Want a cup? Director Mao raised the iced coffee in his hand and gestured from afar. The world's strongest businessman was wearing a short-sleeved t-shirt, baggy hemp trousers, and thin slippers. Leaning against the edge of the huge desk, he looked like he was living in the summer, but also like he had not extricated himself from the holiday life on the equatorial island. He did not fit in with the layout of the room. Thank you. Water is fine. Hot water or ice water? Ice. Naturally, a secretary was in charge of fulfilling such a small request. Bland mountain spring water was quickly sent over. This wasn't the first time Director Mao and Yan Yonghua met. Yan Yonghua's role in the Apocalypse Laboratory had changed recently, so Director Mao didn't regard Yan Yonghua as an outsider. You're researching the little toy that Luo Nan brought? Let's see what he's up to. Yan Yonghua could feel that this person probably had the same feeling as him when he said these boring words. The current spokesperson for the video conference was too noisy. That old man of his had not made any progress in the past few years. He would never be able to grasp the main point. Yan Hong, who was participating in the video conference, was particularly excited at this moment because he was the first to grasp the big secret that was exposed in the live broadcast. That's right. Luo Nan is Mr. Mo. Hood's words were effective. Luo Nan's subconscious answer was the biggest flaw. Hood had never met him before. The one who was communicating with Hood was that so-called Mr. Mo back in Ban City. Aha! Everyone else has been led astray. That female streamer and the higher-ups of the Blood Flame Order are proof of this. I knew it. How could an extraordinary suddenly jump out from this world? The live broadcast at Zeolite Beach happened to coincide with the short exchange between Luo Nan and Hood. The few people present at the scene didn't seem to feel that anything was wrong. and the many participants in the remote video conference were quite indifferent towards this. Of course, Yen Hong lacked sensitivity towards these things. Luo Nan began to arrange the specific work. His voice was stable, concise, and clear. The only disturbance was Yen Hong's loud and clear voice. Yen Hong's limbs were dancing in joy. Yen Yonghua felt that his old man's current appearance was largely due to Luo Nan's speech on reconstructing formatting theory with 4 terminals and 4 levels. Yen Hong was overly stressed. Yen Hong strongly criticized Luo Nan's current behavior. What a deliberately mystifying fellow, Dr. Yen. Finally, someone couldn't help but speak up. I called you over because you're the founder of the archetype format theory. You're an expert in the aspect of burner modification technology. We need you to clarify some of the technical aspects. I believe that there will be more professional people to analyze the other fields. But, Yen Hong originally wanted to defend himself, but it was unknown which big shot was looking at him. His face turned a bit stiff. He paused for a moment before opening his mouth again. His voice had already lowered by at least 2 octaves. Yes, I understand. The world suddenly became much quieter. Luo Nan's voice when he arranged the tasks became all the clearer. The meaning was clear. But soon, because of the issue of the version and authorization, it became a bit confusing. Whether it was those present or those watching the live broadcast, it was hard to avoid doubt. Among the participants, someone said, the Dynamo Core product has already been developed to the 7th generation. The difference in authority between the previous and current versions is too complicated. It doesn't seem good. What does Deep Blue plan on doing? Yen Hong was quite familiar with these things. The current setup is quite clear. Even though there are many types and versions due to the different trends of development laboratories, production departments, and commercial secondary development, the permissions are still clearly divided into 3 categories: basic permissions, application permissions, and experimental permissions. The basic category consists of the 1st and 2nd generation. The application category consists of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th generation. The experimental category consists of the 6th and 7th generation. The ratio of the 3 has been strictly calculated to ensure that a balance can be found between application safety and technological advancement. This was a struggle between money and control. Yen Yonghua's lips curled. He didn't even look over there. He just watched the conversation between Luo Nan, Hood, and Shi Xinhe on the beach. To be more precise, it was a one-sided indoctrination. He was quite interested in some of the new terms. Standard, array. The debate in the video conference continued. Someone brought up another point. If the military's AB team was included, then there would be more than just 3 types of permissions. This was a common topic. Yen Hong said, we've been communicating and coordinating all this time. This involves cooperation and transfer of technology. There are also some issues of cost and profit. After all, the Deep Blue project is a self-operated entity. We need to give returns to the shareholders. This was far from a technical issue, but there was no way around it. This was the domain that Yen Hong was currently most proficient in. So his voice unconsciously grew louder. This continued until a certain participant interrupted him once more. You've been talking for a long time. Are you sure that Luo Nan's experiment can't continue? Of course. Yen Hong's answer was decisive and decisive. Right now on the live broadcast, Luo Nan was asking Shi Xinhe to construct a formatted space. Shi Xinhe revealed a difficult expression. Yen Hong laughed as he watched. He became even more proactive. He used a machine gun-like speed to explain the technical background to the participant, piercing through the broken logic beneath Luo Nan's calm face. The authority barriers formed by the different generations of products are determined by both the Dynamo Core's architecture and the direction of the human body's transformation. Every iteration from the basic to the advanced level needs to break through these 2 barriers. And every time it's completed, these barriers will become more solid. Under this major premise, there is a bit of research value in going from top to bottom. On the other hand, You want the lower level of permissions to cross 2 or even 4 barriers to pull in the higher level permissions to complete a highly coordinated unification of the formatted space. Isn't this a joke? There is no meaning in this. Yan Hong's resounding mood and tone formed an effect similar to an aria. He pointed at the live broadcast screen, his aura soaring like a rainbow. Take this researcher for example. You can tell with a single glance that he has only undergone elementary modifications. At most, he possesses Type 2 authority, which is the application type authority. Wanting him to be the axis to unify Hood with experimental type authority is simply insane. This also exposes Luo Nan's ignorance towards burners and the deep blue platform. On the beach, Luo Nan signaled to Shi Xinhe to release the format of fire. Shi Xinhe's expression was truly indescribable. And in the eyes of the people watching the live broadcast, there was a bit of a comical look. And so, the participants began to freely discuss under the background sound of Yan Hong's chattering. If this experiment can't continue, then what are we watching the live broadcast for? Deep Blue and Tianqi need to give authorization. They need Hood to cooperate. They also need to notify the military to follow up. It looks like it's quite chaotic. But if there's no chaos, there won't be money. Yan Yonghua listened to the somewhat chaotic discussion. His gaze stayed on the live broadcast from beginning to end, and the corner of his mouth unconsciously perked up. Cheers to the endless stream of profits. Director Mao suddenly raised the cup of coffee in his hand and burst into laughter. He smashed the somewhat out-of-shape atmosphere of the conference to pieces. The vast majority of the other participants gave him face, echoing him with a few laughs. In the end, Mao Zhong even raised his cup towards Yan Yonghua, and Yan Yonghua could only respond. He symbolically dabbed his lips with water to conceal his ridiculing expression. Right now, Luo Nan was like giving a demonstration to a child. He was afraid that Shi Xinhe wouldn't understand, so he took the initiative to extend his hand. Yan Hong's volume and tone had already recovered to its peak. Burners are essentially the product of a combination of a highly conceptualized configuration and a highly idealized state of the natural human body. It is precisely because of the conceptualization that every new generation is a great change in design thinking. It is precisely because of the idealization that the human body will be modified with harsh requirements in terms of the body and technology. The regulations of the two are the most solid foundation of burner modification technology. They are also the most powerful barriers. They cannot be. In the next second, the faint white glow of the flame streaked across the bottom of Yan Yonghua's eyes and cheeks under the double refraction of the glass and clear water. He was startled for a moment. The mountain spring water had clearly soaked his lips, penetrating with a cool air. But at this moment, a scorching sensation and a burning sensation smacked him without the slightest scruple. It was as if Yan Yonghua had been scalded. He reflexively moved the cup back, but his movements were too large. He wasn't able to place the cup properly, and the water droplets in the half-full cup splashed out, splashing onto the front of his shirt. But Yan Yonghua didn't make any superfluous movements. He just maintained the posture of the cup splashing to his chest. He stared fixedly at the projection area, stared at the live broadcast, and stared at the cluster of weak yet clear flames in the palm of Luo Nan's hand. The flames possessed a unique sense of light. After a short period of chaos, the sound in his ears became exceptionally clear. Within the entire room, within the entire remote conference scene, only Yan Hong's voice could be heard. He screamed in a trembling manner, "No, no." Yan Hong probably wanted to say something along the lines of impossible. But under the sudden impact, this creator of the archetype format, the authoritative expert in the field of burner modification, was like an old repeater. After getting stuck twice, he began to repeat on the verge of collapse, "Unstoppable. Unstoppable. Unstoppable." Yan Hong's vocal cords had already lost the ability to vibrate by the third time. He didn't make any other movements. His body's functions were already locked to a dead stop. He only had an empty gaze that swept across the chaotic and crisscrossing images of space. It was as if he wanted to hook onto something and maintain the most basic of balance. This was the first time Yen Yonghua looked straight at the scene of the video conference ever since he entered this room. He looked at his old dad, who was using the most absurd and ridiculous method to grab everyone's attention, but who would care about a hoarse old man shouting at the top of his lungs when a truly dazzling character was standing in front of him? Was this the fate of a lifetime? The gazes of the father and son interweaved and intersected. Perhaps there was some communication. But even Yen Yonghua himself wasn't so sure. Yen Hong's eyes flipped up in the next second. He fell backward, completely falling out of the range of the camera. The corners of Yen Yonghua's eyes twitched a bit, but his face remained expressionless. He shifted his gaze once more. And when he looked at the drawing of the live broadcast once more, the young man, who had a matter-of-fact attitude from start to finish, finally twisted the muscles of his face. The blood vessels in the corners of his eyes suddenly swelled, weaving into a dense net. Director Mao raised his eyebrows. He just happened to see a blazing white flame that was far more solid than the one Luo Nan had demonstrated burst forth from the palm of Yen Yonghua's hand. It brushed across the body of the cup he was holding. The walls of the cup cracked and the clear water boiled. The water either flowed or evaporated in the span of a single breath. The cup was empty. Yen Yonghua felt Director Mao's gaze and turned to look at him. Their faces met. Half a second later, Yen Yonghua's eyes drooped down under the pressure of this extraordinary power. He gently placed the glass cup that could shatter at any time on the edge of the office desk. Then he bowed. "I've been impolite. My father's body isn't feeling well. Please allow me to go and make some inquiries. Unfortunately, he's at a critical moment." "I understand. Please help yourself." Director Mao raised the already empty cup once more. This could be considered sending Yen Yonghua off. He was very certain that Yen Yonghua wouldn't return to this room. And right when Yen Yonghua pulled open the door and walked out, the sound of intermittent gasps, startled cries, and even curses rang out in the remote conference room. Yen Yonghua's movements paused for a bit. In the end, he didn't turn his head. He walked out with large strides. Chapter 963. It was 9 o'clock in the morning on Zeolite Beach. Due to the thick fog that pervaded the sea, the sunlight was somewhat obscured. The boundaries of light and shadow on the beach were not clear enough. It was as if there was a layer of frosted glass between them. It made people subconsciously feel that many details might be missing in this moment. So at this very moment, thousands of eyes from all over the world stared at this private beach with all their might. They were like thousands of searchlights. Even though everyone had different viewpoints and thoughts, they had indeed achieved instant coordination in this instant. They hated that they could not completely illuminate this place, especially the details of the domain of space in Luo Nan's palm. The emotions were so intense that Shi Xinhe's and Zhang Yingying's lenses seemed to be unable to bear it. Their lenses shook violently. From another perspective, it was extremely in line with the mental state of the vast majority of people. In fact, the lens of Shi Xinhe, who was currently standing opposite Luo Nan on the beach, had already gone crooked to who knows where. Fortunately, Zhang Yingying was still there. She realized the linkage, projecting this absurd and inexplicable scene into everyone's field of vision. From Zhang Yingying's lens, one could see that Shi Xinhe was like an old machine immersed in seawater. The joints of his entire body were rusted to death. He maintained the posture of reaching out with his hand, and the format of fire swayed faintly. It barely reflected the radiance of the cluster in Luo Nan's palm, but he did not make any further movements. He did not know what to do next. Shi Xinhe did not move. Luo Nan moved. Luo Nan's palm, burning with flames, extended a certain distance forward. The edge of his palm made contact with Shi Xinhe's thumb, basically maintaining a flat surface. The two blazing clusters of format of fire swayed a few times under the blowing of the sea breeze. The flames and light made contact, and they suddenly swelled. In this instant, the eyelids of many people watching the live broadcast twitched. Some narrowed, and some widened. Was it about to explode? No. The two clusters of flames were merely blending together. No distinction or difference could be seen between them. Luo Nan maintained a flat voice. Maintain this state. Next, we'll make some fine adjustments. Fuck me. Papercut spat out a fragrant breath once more. The expanding and blending flames seemed to transform into a sword of light that pierced straight into his eyes. It stabbed him so hard that he suddenly raised his head. He forgot that the bench he sat on was next to the wall. Amidst the muffled sound, the back of his head collided heavily. For a time, Papercut didn't feel any pain. Even his grunt was stifled in his throat. He only felt that the scene in the projection area before his eyes was swaying and fluctuating. It was absurd to the extreme. Di Weiwu was also blinking his eyes. Although he was young, he had lived in this circle and had seen a lot. Of course, he was still a child, and he only knew one side of things. This is the format of fire, right? Did Brother Luo Nan learn Secretary He and Guard Gao's ultimate moves? God would probably cry if he heard that. Papercut's thoughts swayed back and forth, casually weaving all sorts of illogical scenes. At this moment, the pain of the back of his head hitting the wall was transmitted from his nerve endings to his central nervous system. He gasped and clutched his head, but it also made him a little more clear-headed. He subconsciously turned his attention to his friend group, hoping to get some support from there. No matter what it was. However, there was only the tragic scene of a tsunami passing through the group. There were some dull, panicked, and even inappropriate expressions, as well as some hi. Everyone's minds were scattered and shivering under the illumination of the blazing white firelight that Luo Nan and Shishina supported together. As the first person to send the message to the group, Papercut felt that he had the responsibility to sort out the logic. However, as soon as his thoughts formed words, he was convinced that this was the stupidest guess of all. Nanster, he, accepted the transformation? At the same time, in a group that Papercut wasn't too clear about, someone asked nearly the same question in an investor's video conference in Deep Blue World. In the next second, there were sneers and mockery. Are you saying that Yan Hong fainted from happiness? But how do you explain this? The person who was rebuked slapped the table. Yan Hong, that bastard, just said that the dynamo core and the corresponding modification technique are two barriers for every level of authority. That researcher was at the 2nd level, so he should be at the 4th level. What was he now? High and mighty? Then what's the point of us having authority here and the passing of generations? Is this a joke? There were some who were a bit calmer. They spoke calmly, but their meaning was in agreement. Deep Blue needs to give us an explanation. I suggest that we convene an emergency meeting of the board of directors and let the CTO and COO give an explanation. We still need to wait for a meeting? Let's save some time. Herman, who had participated in yet another vexing meeting, joined the ranks of the denouncing. The young man's actions were even more direct. I'll contact Wang Yu and Li Wei. In addition, I feel that the so-called experts need to be replaced with someone with a stronger mental fortitude. Before Herman's voice could fall, a rather conspicuous bald head appeared in front of the commentary camera after Yan Hong fainted. This person was expressionless as he nodded towards the camera. I'm very sorry that an accident occurred. I hope that I can satisfy everyone. Many of the people participating in the meeting recognized this fellow. Bald Jeff, an important scientist of Deep Blue and the Apocalypse Laboratory. He was an authority on dynamo core technology, and he would occasionally appear as a spokesperson for the laboratory. Herman and Jeff had a bit of friendship, but this didn't mean that he would accept this kind of replacement. Jeff, Li Wei should make an appearance in this matter. We absolutely don't want our trillions of investments to sink into the ocean of the Deep Blue world. Mr. Herman and everyone else, Chief Li Wei is indeed unable to participate in the meeting. He's currently on the phone with Lieutenant General Joseph. He has an appointment in a bit. But I believe that he will certainly pay attention at all times. Someone rushed to ask Herman a question. So you're saying that Li Wei also believes that this is a major event? Bald Jeff was even more solemn than usual in front of the camera. He was like an emotionless speech machine. From a professional technical point of view, we still need to gather further information and conduct analysis. We need to know what step Luo Nan can take in the end. It sounded like an excuse at first, but Herman captured an ominous tone from within. You're saying that Luo Nan has indeed activated the format of fire under the premise that he hasn't received any modifications? From the current situation, fuck your current situation. He's a burner right now? He doesn't need any modification techniques. He's a purely self-sufficient burner? Bald Jeff's eyebrows furrowed. We can't come to a conclusion lightly. And even if we use a broad definition, he is. This is an extremely special case. No matter what he does now or what he does in the future, it doesn't prove that this case possesses repeatability and universality. Herman burst into laughter. You're saying that he can do even more? Mr. Herman. Someone suddenly interrupted. Isn't he going to do the format of space? A cold wind suddenly blew through the video conference room. Not a single one of the dozen or so people in the conference room spoke. Who's next? Under the live camera, Luo Nan completed the fine-tuning that no one besides him could figure out. Then he indicated to the idiots beside him to let the ones behind him follow. Hood, who was originally standing closer to the front, was still in a dazed and absurd state. He stared blankly for a moment before coming to his senses. He took a step forward, but he wasn't as fast as the others who moved their lips. I'll do it. The one who spoke was a young man who looked extremely strong. He wore the same training uniform as Shinha. They should be members who had come to T-City to participate in the safety training. Sure enough, Shinha introduced mechanically. Steven, this is the project teams. Luo Nan didn't care about this. He just let Steven ignite the format of fire. The young fellow, who was at least 10 years older than Luo Nan, had the expression of someone who was carrying out a dangerous mission. He extended his hand and let his own aura fuse into the group of flames. With you as the main axis. Huh? The two participants had stupefied expressions. Luo Nan's gaze pointed at Shinha. I'm talking about you. You'll be the main axis of the framework of the format domain. I'm the one doing the experiment. In order to guarantee objectivity, I can't participate in your domain. Objectivity my ass. Hundreds of people roared in ridicule as they watched Luo Nan single-handedly direct this scene. Luo Nan was calm in Zhang Yingying's camera. This magnitude is more or less enough. It can sufficiently interfere with the mental and material planes at the same time, allowing the burner's prescriptions to be projected into the structure of space and time. It also maintains relative stability. It can barely be called at the domain. Maintain it. Not bad. It's that simple. This was a lie. He wasn't the only one who guessed this. There were so many ability users and military burners all over the world. It wasn't like no one had seen the format space before. It could also be said that the format domain was activated. Life energy was transformed into the most straightforward light and heat. The glorious scene of the engraving of the framework of rules and regulations in space and time was something that would be unforgettable for the rest of one's life. The most classic battle example in recent times was undoubtedly Blood Prison Tian Bang laying down the format space. He used absolute superiority to kill the Blood Flame Order's veteran expert, Mo Luan. Not only did that battle push Tian Bang to the position of number 1 beneath the extraordinary, his name shaking the world. It also provided an excellent example and direction for the secular military and political system to touch upon the highest level of the extraordinary. And right now, the format fire in the palms of the three people was stable and blended together. The color of the light gradually thickened. But compared to the battle between Tian Bang and Mo Luan, the difference was like the difference between heaven and earth. Can this be considered a format domain? Herman was filled with nervousness and a sliver of delight. He asked Baldy Jeff for an answer. However, Jeff didn't answer. He just stared very intently at the live broadcast screen. Luo Nan, who was in front of the camera, was completely unaware of this. He continued to speak his own words and do his own thing. You two are usually partners. Your gears work together quite well, but it's not typical enough. Next, we're going to change groups. We're going to change the best version as well. Many of you seem to be different. Hood, who was within arm's reach, had already opened his mouth. Luo Nan gave a clear order. Give me an even lower version. First consider compatibility. Hood had already forcefully stuffed back the words that were on the tip of his tongue. The other fellows didn't care. Someone immediately raised his hand. T-City's Coastal Defense Special Forces. Second Lieutenant Wilson. This was a man with a full beard that looked more like a pirate than a soldier. Luo Nan's gaze swept up and down. Okay. You're up. Wilson grinned. He went forward and extended his hand, imitating Luo Nan. And so, the four people squeezed into a small circle. It was like a pep talk before a soccer match. Unfortunately, it lacked hot-bloodedness and excitement. They were more apprehensive. Crackle. A very clear explosive sound rang out. The place where the four people joined their hands together suddenly erupted with a flicker of a lantern. The format fire, which had been steadily increasing in brightness all this time, suddenly rose in brightness. Then it clearly dropped. It appeared to be flickering between brightness and darkness. Hey! Zhang Yingying let out a low cry from her throat. She forcefully suppressed it back down. Her reaction was extremely representative. An incompatible reaction has occurred in the intergenerational architecture. Bald Jeff timely explained in the video conference. Did he fail? At least two people spoke at the same time. They couldn't wait any longer. Before Jeff could respond, dozens of tiny flying ant-like objects could be seen floating outside of Luo Nan's body. They buzzed, and in the next second, it was as if they were attracted by the flame in the center of the four people. They coiled around and cast themselves toward the place where the light was the brightest. They were really thrown in. However, the format of light, which was transformed from blazing life energy, didn't seem to possess any lethality. It allowed these little things to be thrown in and out. They revolved and shuttled back and forth. It was like a magic show. The only visible change was that the flickering flame light became stable and thick once more. It reflected on the faces and bodies of the four people in the surrounding with a seemingly substantial layer of light. Is this a smokescreen? Those little things. They're the syncopators? Is he really controlling them? What principles are they based on? There were some investors who continued to strongly doubt Luo Nan, but most of them leaned toward a more realistic level. Because of this, even these questions were pressed toward Bald Jeff. Jeff wasn't Yen Hong. He wouldn't grant every request, and he wouldn't speak without thinking. No matter how anxious the participants were, he, the commentator, remained as immovable as a mountain. In fact, most of his energy was focused on communicating with the key characters. He had already sent Hood, who was directly under the Apocalypse Laboratory, a few dozen monitoring and testing projects. He requested that they be carried out properly no matter what. No matter how good the live broadcast was, it couldn't be more reliable than these data. The problem was that Hood couldn't get close. Hood, who was shouldering a heavy responsibility, began to feel a bit impatient in his heart. Hood had long since done the projects that could be observed and tested in close proximity. The rest required him to personally participate in order to sense and record. Of course, this was the most important part. He couldn't figure out whether or not Luo Nan's repeated exclusion of him was intentional or not. It must be known that the decision of the experiment rested on Luo Nan alone. He wasn't the only experimental tool, like Hood. Hood put himself in Luo Nan's shoes and thought about it. Even if the military's AB team had an ambiguous attitude before, they would probably force themselves to come over right now if they could find this kind of opportunity, this kind of scene, and this kind of event. Would it be difficult to find a few dozen burners in such a large city like T-City? Moreover, the Pacific Fleet was all around them. There was also the aerospace fleet above them. If they were really forced into a corner, the Deep Blue Walker combat team of several major cities in the Pacific Rim could airdrop burners within 3 hours. Chapter 964. Hood pursed his lips. He ignored the glare of the intense light as he stared at the area where Luo Nan and the other three's palms converged. He stared unblinkingly at the increasingly dazzling mass of flames. He was already considering how to shamelessly join the fray first. Hey, you. Hood suddenly came to a realization. At the same time, he felt Luo Nan's calm and clear gaze. Your strength and authority should be the highest in this group of people. You don't have any objections to being a support, right? Luo Nan's rare concern for humanity made Hood feel uncomfortable from head to toe. He didn't forget that his own identity was the most awkward one right now. However, Hood was burdened with heavy responsibilities. He couldn't care about anything else. He quickly shook his head. No problem. Professor Luo, feel free to make the arrangements. Then that's fine. You join in first and familiarize yourself with the structure. I'm about to withdraw. The rest of you, join in after 10 seconds. Hood's eyelids twitched, but he didn't say a word. He took a step forward and extended his hand forward. The format of fire in the center, which had just recovered to a relatively stable state, suddenly increased in brightness due to the connection of his aura. It was like a powerful lamp that normal people would find it hard to look at directly. It was like a gust of hot wind had been set off under the spread of the powerful light. The dozens of centimeters that had been shuttling through the format of fire were instantly blown away. A few of them burned and exploded midway. They looked extremely miserable. Luo Nan didn't say anything, but Hood's heart was beating fiercely. He had already done his best to estimate and speculate the energy structure of this cluster of format of fire when he was observing from the outside. He had considered the node he was connecting to. He didn't want to destroy it. Absolutely not. It was just that the large amount of photons that appeared explosively in the air the moment he entered and the energy that leaked from them gave him the feeling that he had accidentally damaged some delicate yet fragile sealing device. It was as if he had poked through a paper lantern. How could something so fragile be called a format domain? Hood didn't feel it was appropriate to evaluate anything. He just hurriedly suppressed the incorporeal energy structure that seemed to be on the verge of falling apart along with the other participants. As for the examination items that Baldy Jeff had arranged, he had forgotten about them for a time. Luo Nan withdrew his hand at this time. Lead. Shinha's shout was quite miserable. Aside from the panic of watching the core structure collapse, he also hoped that Luo Nan would lend a helping hand. Luo Nan didn't even shift his gaze. Zhang Yingying's lens was very sensitive. She immediately followed Luo Nan's line of sight and looked around. She looked at the syntome that had been blown into the air. These small metal and aggregate products were moving up and down in the feeble airflow, but in the end, they still maintained a dynamic balance and were scattered in an area with a diameter of about 10 meters. This is... Zhang Yingying wanted to ask a question, but Luo Nan turned to the camera. He extended his hand and pointed to the side. Understood. Zhang Yingying understood tacitly. She and Luo Nan immediately moved out of the range of the syncopator. When he turned around to look at those experimental tools, they were still standing stiffly on the spot. All of them were at a loss for what to do, and they looked extremely pitiful. What's going on? The experiment is still going on, right? Zhang Yingying swallowed the word failure. It's all right. It's just that some people are a little stiff in the head. It's probably because they let the dynamo core take care of a lot of things. Luo Nan sighed and raised his voice. The flame is just a demonstration. Isn't it because you guys are inside the formatting domain? The rest of you, go in. Sometimes, concentration is very important. The group of people looked at each other in dismay, but Luo Nan's command was still effective. The remaining 4 military elites began to draw closer to their comrades who had set fire to nothing. As the distance between them continued to shrink, their auras intertwined with each other. A new feeling began to emerge. Hood's eyelids twitched once more a second later. Shinha, who had been designated by Luo Nan as the main axis of the formatting domain, subconsciously raised his hand. His fingers, palms, and elbows streaked across the scorching radiance of the format of fire, setting off a field of flowing sparks. Then, the excessively bright format of fire shattered with a bang. The vast majority of photons abided by the second law of thermodynamics. They transferred and transmitted energy to the surrounding air. However, there was a considerable portion of photons that suffered additional constraints during the process of overflowing. They followed the flickering paths of light as they swam and circulated in the air. They were like tungsten filaments that glowed from the heat of an enormous light bulb. These paths were still floating in the air at first, without anything to rely on. However, in the blink of an eye, all the surrounding participants had become a part of these paths. They're glowing. There were definitely more than one or two people like Di Weiwu who cried out involuntarily in shock in every region of the world. At this very moment, the lens encompassed all of the burners on the beach. And these special humans who were gathered together practically simultaneously turned into glowing bodies before the eyes of thousands of spectators from all over the world. Streak after streak of distorted light paths appeared on their bodies and continued to spread out. Soon, they connected with the paths floating in the air, breaking away from the two-dimensional structure that circulated on the surface of their bodies. They possessed an even more prominent penetrative power. The visible region was like this. What about the invisible region? More accurately speaking, what about the inside of these people's bodies? It was impossible for people not to think too much. The blazing radiance radiating from these people on the beach really did seem like they were burning. The surroundings of the beach seemed to darken. In reality, this was due to the glare of the focal area of the lens being too dazzling. Quite a few people felt their vision blur after watching for a long time. They didn't know what was going on, so they could only ask professionals. What's going on? What in the world is Luo Nan trying to do? A certain representative of an organization participating in the video conference completely lost any thoughts of deep thought. He just wanted to know the final answer. Out of control. Bald Jeff simply spat out a single word. Right now, there was no need for Hood, who was trapped in the situation, to give an answer. A preliminary conclusion could already be obtained through the changes in the data of the remote monitoring. What out of control? Are they going to die? Enter a state of mental derangement? Bald Jeff furrowed his brows, but he still accepted this unprofessional description. He explained once more, the vital signs of those being monitored can be considered stable. The out of control I'm talking about is mainly referring to the energy and information structure of the human body that is dominated by the dynamo core. Can't you explain it a bit more clearly? Are you guys trying to recite the rebirth mantra at a time like this? Bald Jeff shot a cold glance over. He continued to use his own pace to explain. The current situation is that all of the burners on Zeolite Beach have a portion of their strength that has broken away from the dynamo core's regulations. Simply speaking, they are still healthy and full of vitality as burners. However, this vitality has already broken away from the dynamo core's original settings. They can completely do some things that are impossible to calculate within the existing models. They can create a few unpredictable troubles. The members of the conference were silent for a few seconds. Finally, someone understood the deeper meaning behind Bald Jeff's words. So what you're saying is that the so-called out of control doesn't mean that those fellows on the beach have entered a state of mental derangement. You're just saying that our control has collapsed? Bald Jeff didn't give a direct answer. He just grinned. The good news is that everything we've seen so far is still within the scope of the relevant configuration logic. Perhaps we can quietly appreciate the brilliance of the structural light that doesn't exist within the dynamo core's design. Perhaps we'll be able to use it in the next upgrade. A muffled sound came from within the virtual venue. It was unknown who had smashed the table, but the sound waves were filled with anxiety and irritation. Control it a bit. On Zeolite Beach, Luo Nan clapped his hands. He indicated to Shi Xinhe and the others, who were rapidly transforming into human tungsten filaments, to exercise some restraint. You guys don't have armor on right now. The overflowing energy has a convergent effect. If you keep doing this, you'll really burn up. The 7 burners in a circle looked at each other in dismay. Their minds were absent-minded. At this stage, there really weren't many who could truly understand their own state. Hood could barely be considered one, but his current state of mind was a bit scattered. His cultivation was the highest within this batch of burners, and his abilities were the strongest. He had the most exquisite grasp of the dynamo core system and the corresponding configuration logic. However, the more he was like this, the less he was able to resist the structural light that exceeded the scope of his understanding. The structural light that conformed to configuration logic was even more profound and profound. Within this seemingly fragmented yet indistinctly integrated structure, he himself had become a part of the entire structure. Whether it was his life force or his thoughts and consciousness, they were all reaching a domain that he had never sensed before. He had never considered it. He had never imagined this domain. He was no longer as strict as steel, no, the flow model of energy and information was still strict. It was just that it was no longer those extremely familiar, man-made regulations. It was even more impossible for it to be a model that the dynamo core was grasping and calculating. Instead, it was in a vaster domain. It was outside the limits of his perception. It was thrilling, yet it was a perfect maneuver and configuration that made his obsessive-compulsive disorder feel extremely comfortable. The problem was that he was truly too powerless as the controller. Hood was still letting his thoughts run wild when he was suddenly called out. Especially you. Hood, right? Huh. Just being in a daze won't do. Your ability is the strongest. Even though you're not the main axis, you can completely act as a valve. What should I do? This was originally done by you guys. Is it that hard to gather them together? 7 burners. 7 elites. Right now they were like 7 idiots. Idiots that were about to be roasted from the inside out. Everyone in the audience could see Luo Nan's helplessness. He put his hands on his hips and thought for a few seconds. Then he lowered his head to reality. Forget it. Right now you guys find a more clear-cut area of focus. For example, the sandy beach beneath your feet. Sure, Shinha, you're the main axis. You decide. Yes. Do something to this sand. Use the domain you guys are supporting. Sure, Shinha's scalp was covered in sweat. He looked at the sand beneath his feet. His mind was nearly blank. As for the one that left the deepest impression, that's right. That ball of sand. Bang. It was clear that the result of using too much strength was a muffled sound that nearly shook the entire beach beneath his feet. The sand gave rise to fine waves that spread in all directions. It was so much so that even the seawater that surged to the head of the beach was pushed back a bit. However, Luo Nan's previous arrangements were also shaken. Some of the mounds of sand were trembling. Some had even collapsed. Wow! The blood flame order has suffered a huge loss this time. Zhang Yingying, who was in charge of the camera, could not help but spit out a sentence. This natural beach of high quality might not be able to withstand such torment. The camera quickly shifted. Luo Nan maintained his posture with his hands on his hips. He just tilted his head to express his helplessness, but in the end he didn't say anything. In any case, a portion of the accumulated danger had been eliminated, right? As for the true victim, Meng Chong of the Blood Flame Order, he was currently on a call with someone. Meng Chong merely raised his head to glance at Zhang Yingying when he heard her voice. Soon, he sank into a rapid and frequent conversation. Comparatively speaking, he was a bit more sensitive to the camera. Look at the main point. Focus on it. Zhang Yingying's simple camera shift caused the emotions of her friends to surge. Aren't you filming a romance movie? I dare you to say that again. I'll immediately turn off my phone. Sister Yingying, Auntie Zhang, we were wrong. In this unconventional and short exchange of live broadcasts, the camera shifted back to the high-brightness core area jointly constructed by the 7 burners. She looked at these experimental tools that were neither segmented nor assembled. They stood frozen on the spot. Could this even be considered a core? Zhang Yingying obviously had objections regarding whether or not it was a core. The true core was Luo Yuanwei, okay? This monkey's movements were too cool. Also, why did she feel that the most crucial element wasn't the burners or the glowing tungsten strands, but something else? Her camera shifted slightly, giving the scintometers floating in the air a quick and eye-catching focus operation. An eye-catching arc of light was flung out from the high-brightness area of the 7 burners at this time. It instantly bent and circled around the surrounding air, darkening and disappearing a second later. And in this 1 second that was neither long nor short, the arc of light connected at least 3 scintometers. And every time it connected, there was a clear turning point. Perfect. Zhang Yingying gave herself a thumbs up in her mind. She could practically imagine the extreme clamor behind this camera. Advertisement master photography achievement of the inner world achieved. Asterisk. Omega asterisk, asterisk, not mentioning how Zhang Yingying madly added more scenes to the syncopator, the danger level of the core area in most people's eyes decreased. And after 2 or 3 meaningless and extreme movements, Xinhe began to grasp some basic skills. On the beach, a fountain started gushing out. It was purely made up of fine sand. As its height grew, the amount of sand involved also continued to increase. However, it formed a relatively balanced cycle with the beach below. Many people who had been watching the live broadcast from the beginning quickly came to a realization: Xinhe was imitating. He was imitating Luo Nan's demonstration class not too long ago. The first step was to pull out a sand column from the beach. The next step was to turn it into a snake that coiled around it, but it was really difficult to control. "It's better to stabilize it first," Hood said in a low voice, subconsciously wanting to help. As soon as he said that, the sand fountain, which was originally controlled by Xinhe alone, suddenly slowed down and gradually took on a clear shape. Hood's words served as a reminder that they, as experimental tools, were still rushing over when Luo Nan demonstrated. However, they had certainly watched the live broadcast. They more or less understood it, but they still had a general impression of it. This was a relatively clear goal. 2 or 3 seconds later, the 7 people began to cooperate. This was a kind of convergence on the level of consciousness. Originally, there were established procedures for this method of telepathic shaping. Everyone had learned it before. But now, a profound and unrestrained change had occurred in the way energy and information flowed. The established procedures were no longer useful. The slightest difference could lead to a deviation of 1,000 miles. Even if they held the same thoughts, referred to the same situation, and pursued the same goal, there would always be some differences on the level of thinking. They had to compromise, amend, and form a general tacit understanding. A consensus was reached in the first segment. There was still the second, third, and fourth segments. Soon, everyone discovered that this was an extremely torturous process. The consensus reached in the first segment was very likely not the beginning of tacit understanding, but the beginning of conflict. Right now, they could feel and utilize far too many configurations. Every single configuration seemed to conform to past operating procedures. All of them could form logical, complete, and clear-cut train of thought. This was a situation that would drive people with dysphoria crazy. We have to reach a consensus. Don't bet on that dog's hit tacit understanding. Hood finally couldn't help but speak once more. You're Xinhe, right? You want to be the captain and the main axis. Don't you need to communicate? Of course I need to. The sweat on Xinhe's forehead had already stuck his hair together, but his voice was even clearer. It crushed the bewildered and uneasy mental state from before. If we just need to make a sculpture, then we can communicate and amend it. That's enough. Then the dynamo core will take care of everything. But what we're doing right now, isn't it an experiment? What experiment? This is Chief Luo's problem. What we need to do is to support a formatting domain. He paused for a moment, then emphasized, a formatting domain that is qualified, has no generation restrictions, and can operate on its own. Xinhe turned his head to look as he spoke. A faintly discernible trail of light lingered in the surrounding air, faintly forming an enormous bowl-shaped hemisphere. Dozens of scintometers floated above this curved surface. They were like the stars in the vault of heaven. They seemed to be unfettered, just coldly staring down. In fact, every participant knew very well that the reason why they were able to indulge their life energy so excessively up until now, breaking through the limits of the dynamo core, and still maintain relative order, so much so that they maintained a basic level of agreement on a logical level, was because of these little things like flying insects. They gave specific interference at specific locations, at specific times. If it weren't for these little things, they would probably have already become moths in the candlelight. So, Sher Shinha was a bit at a loss for words at this time. He roughly knew what he should do, but he still didn't understand what he should do next. At this time, Luo Nan began to clap from outside, drawing their attention. Everyone, I know what you want to do. However, what Sher Shinha said is correct. The ideal structure of a four-sided, four-layered superconfiguration isn't a simple model that can be piled up. How about this? I'll give you guys a ready-made one. Spread out a bit. The 7 experimental tools subconsciously separated. Half a second later, the stiff and twisted sand pillar by their feet began to wildly dance like a snake. Then it bent and piled up, gradually forming edges and corners. Clearly, Luo Nan was manipulating the grains of sand. But the problem couldn't be explained so simply. This was because in the eyes of Sher Shinha and the others, under Zhang Yingying's sensitive lens, the centometers floating and flying in the air were clearly dancing and resonating with the grains of sand. There were also those crisscrossing rays of light. In fact, everyone watching this scene could more or less discover the sand pile structure that was gradually taking shape was currently interacting with all the elements related to the burners in their field of vision. Herman suddenly opened his mouth in the video conference. If we send out an action team to take measures against Luo Nan, will we end up like those 7 idiots over there? No one answered him, including Baldy Jeff. Herman actually answered his own question. That's right. One has clearly fallen in already. Several seconds later, a ball of sand that was nearly identical to the one Luo Nan had previously displayed took form and floated in the middle of Sher Shinha and the others. They could see the millions of grains of sand that formed the ball of sand. They revolved orderly on the smooth surface of the sphere. However, they didn't revolve in a single direction. Instead, they revolved in a complex circulatory system similar to the circulation of Earth's atmosphere. The group of people felt their scalps go numb just by looking at this. Are you ready? I'm going to let go. The 7 experimental tools really were about to collapse when they heard similar words. The key was that Luo Nan did what he said he would. His control power, which was like an extension of his arm, instantly broke away. The originally perfectly round ball of sand immediately transformed into an extremely ugly shape. Moreover, it sank down. The 7 people in the circle practically squatted down at the same time. They extended their hands, wanting to catch it. Luckily, the ball of sand didn't hit the ground. It dangled dangerously. You guys can be at ease and boldly try. Really. Even if there's a problem, the first thing to collapse will be the centometers. Luo Nan encouraged them from outside the circle. But before his voice could fall, a centometer ignited once more above their heads. It exploded into pieces amidst the intense light and flames. Someone in the circle let out a cry of alarm. It was the pirate-like officer, Wilson. He had made a bad start, causing at least 2 people to let out short, low cries. These elites of the military had undergone strict training and selection. They had gone through trials and tribulations to complete the transformation of burners. They behaved like a group of young girls who had just stepped into society. There was no other way. Luo Nan could only console them. It's okay. Aren't there a few dozen more? You guys are safe before they all explode. He looked at the time as he spoke. Their current progress was a bit behind his expectations. Perhaps he should plan things out and open up a second battlefield. He should let some steps proceed simultaneously. He turned his head to look at the thick fog above the sea's surface. He began to ponder over a deeper problem. It was just that he was thinking deeply. His words were a bit casual. The fragile equilibrium that was completely constructed in nothingness trembled once more from the stimulation of his words. The centimeters exploded 4 or 5 times in a row. Luo Nan spread his hands helplessly. There's no need to be nervous at all, okay? This is just a temporary team-building activity. Isn't it good to treat it as a group bouncing a ball? Just drop it on the ground and start over. Believe me. This beach that you guys are on is the most suitable environment for you guys right now. You guys should be like fish in water here. Your wishes will come true, and everything will go according to your wishes. Come on, smile. What Luo Nan obtained were 7 awkward and stiff smiling faces. Chapter 965. Okay. Luo Nan confirmed once more. He really lacked leadership and mobilization abilities. He simply didn't add to the mess and let them adjust and solve it themselves. Of course, the necessary experimental goals and training subjects had to be clear. Once you guys maintain this sand ball, go over there. That's your final workstation. Luo Nan pointed in the direction of the lone deep blue walker exoskeleton armor by the seashore. You should all have experience controlling deep blue walkers. So the next step is to get that fellow to move. Sure, Shinha, you're the main control, but everything is in a formatted domain. It should be more outstanding than a single person controlling it. Bang 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 bang. It was unknown who shuddered, but another string of syncopators exploded. Luo Nan was already used to this. He just treated it as firecrackers. After thinking and calculating for a few seconds, he simply replenished the group, increasing the number of syncopators to 30. Feel the rhythm of the syncopators' operation. You can also try to segment them. Actually, you guys aren't used to it. You guys are too nervous. It was quite interesting to say that as the number of syncopators increased, the group of people felt that their tolerance for mistakes had increased. Their mental states clearly improved. It was unknown who started it, but they actually tried to get closer to the deep blue walkers by the seashore. Luo Nan didn't disturb them any further, but he turned to look at the syncopator reserves in his hand. They clearly didn't have many left. The second batch should be out. Send some more over. This time Luo Nan pointed at Meng Chong. Meng Chong was still in the middle of a heated discussion with the higher-ups and researchers of the order. He was shocked when he heard Luo Nan's words. He looked at the burners on the beach and the syncopators surrounding them. Only then did he understand. He stood up and responded. Meng Chong's communication with the order had not been cut off. Right now, he just needed to relay the matter. However, he felt the formatted domain erected on the beach and thought of Elder Mo Luan, whose corpse no longer remained. It was hard not to feel strange. Also, Meng Chong didn't forget that Luo Nan's experiment on Zeolite Beach was actually divided into different sections. The group of burners was just one of them. In contrast, Luo Nan was right here. From Meng Chong's perspective, Luo Nan was reminding him, sure Shinha and this group of military elites would adapt very quickly. If Luo Nan didn't make any progress when the time came, the Blood Flame Order would lose face. Meng Chong took a deep breath. He felt that the efficiency of simple communication was far from enough. These burners were tossing and turning back and forth, but Luo Nan was guiding them step by step. This was breaking the rules. I'll go right away. I'll be back soon. This time, Meng Chong not only needed to replenish the syncopator, but he also needed to call for help. Compared to the military, the Blood Flame Order's strength might not be enough, but in D City, how could they not be able to form a team of 30 to 50 people? He remembered that Luo Nan's previous words had the meaning of, the more the better. Meng Chong bowed towards Luo Nan and left in a hurry. His flying car had already become Luo Nan's experimental tool. Fortunately, this place was under the jurisdiction of Aber Manor. Running back didn't take much effort. Luo Nan could feel Meng Chong's sudden sense of urgency and competitiveness. He was happy to see this happen. He looked at the time again. It was almost 9:30. Time was ticking away. If he had to go out to sea in the afternoon to do an in-depth experiment, he would be pressed for time. Unfortunately, some things could not be rushed. Luo Nan pondered over what he should do when there was a gap. At the same time, Zhang Yingying, who was in charge of the mirror, silently leaned over and gave him a close-up. "Hey, are the chestnuts ready?" "Huh? You just said that you need to give an example. You said you swallowed half of it. Don't you feel full after all this time?" "Oh, I almost forgot." Zhang Yingying wanted to give Luo Nan the camera, so she naturally had to follow him. It was impossible for her to take care of the burner's team-building activity. As for Shi Xinhe, he couldn't even take care of himself. How could he spare the energy to film? The camera position was completely random right now. There were only a few crooked close-up shots or scenes that flashed by quickly. Shi Xinhe's rigid first-person perspective was completely immersed in the scene, letting the entire world's audience feel his nervousness. There was nothing else aside from this. At this time, everyone could only rely on Zhang Yingying. But now, she must have done this on purpose. Right now, Zhang Yingying was enduring the curses of many regions of the world, but she also received the same amount of praise. Xia City's papercut was already slapping his thigh in excitement. "You should have done this a long time ago. Those burners are going to be used as equipment, not for class." Praise was like clouds in the group and in the circle. Zhang Yingying's eyes curved as she smiled. She took on the posture of a popular host and host. "Come, Professor Luo. Let's take advantage of the time we have now to fulfill our promise. You have time, right?" In the end, she still felt a bit guilty. "Yeah, no problem." Luo Nan pondered for a second, then he began to enter the main topic. "Where was I just now? Give me an example. Give me the example of the random segmentation of the life layer." "Oh, or the super configuration theory?" Luo Nan nodded, continuing his previous train of thought. "Yes, the segmentation and the super configuration theory. What I mean is that the most important thing to do in order to accept this theory is to do a good job in segmentation and reconstruction of the foundational components." Zhang Yingying automatically took the role of a supporting actor. She inserted an advertisement in passing. "Do we need to use a syncopator? Of course it's good to be good at using tools, but just a syncopator isn't enough. We need to maintain a certain degree of objectivity. After all, it's hard to avoid a certain degree of deviation when we segment ourselves, especially when it comes to the mental plane. Then what should we do? We can consider a relatively objective environment for usage. We can consider a research method that leans more towards the application type." Luo Nan was neither impatient nor impatient. He spoke slowly and tirelessly. "We know. I'm guessing that even if cultivation theory and civilization develop to an extremely high level in the future, the vast majority of people at the bottom and middle levels should still have their clairvoyance and sensing precision within the micrometer range when it comes to individual cultivation. It's impossible for them to touch upon the nanometer level and below in their individual cultivation experience, let alone drive and mobilize them. This is logical. But we all know that the gene is the material foundation of the inheritance of life. The diameter of a gene is usually only 2 nanometers. It will only be more difficult to segment the lower layer of the life substrate. In this way, segment to the lowest layer and carry out reconstruction is a correct line of nonsense. It will become a false proposition on the cultivation plane in reality." Zhang Yingying grunted twice. "That's right, it's like this. But it seems like you're also talking nonsense right now. Do you have any hard heads?" Luo Nan laughed. "The most basic method is to invest a large amount of manpower and capital to carry out basic research. Cutting-edge instruments and high-level researchers are used to carry out real-time monitoring and research of the cultivation of living beings. There's no fear of failure. There's no fear of mistakes. There's no fear of starting over." Luo Nan was still smiling at the beginning, but his words gradually became more and more serious. Especially the direction of logical reasoning. It corroborated with his memories of the relay station. The relevant scenes and fragments became more and more vivid. He vaguely saw Yang Lu standing in front of him with a solemn expression. Laws are laid out like a pass. Corpses are piled like mountains. It requires the correct direction of evolution, a perfect research system of genetic science, powerful social mobilization, and extremely bitter sacrifices, including lives and morals. No one is willing to pay such a great sacrifice. But this is necessary if one wants to cross the natural barrier of racial evolution. Luo Nan couldn't help but think of another person. Gym Master Show. There were some things that didn't need to be personally explained. Luo Nan's status rose, and the amount of information he received increased, allowing him to capture some traces. The person who stole heavenly fire, his mind gradually became absent-minded, so much so that he forgot whether or not he had truly reversed the words Liang Lu had told him. Where was I? Zhang Yingying rolled her eyes. You're talking about not being afraid of toppling over and starting anew. Luo Nan let out a long breath. In the end, he decided to temporarily swallow Yang Lu's words back into his stomach. He just made an approximate, relatively gentle restoration. Yes, not being afraid of toppling over and starting anew. Find a common cultivation method that conforms to the vast majority of people. Form an educational and research system that goes from general knowledge to specialization to higher levels of education and research. Endlessly expand the base, increase the number of samples, provide reference, and continue to improve. Stop. It was a pity that Zhang Yingying didn't have a microphone or any other handy gadgets at hand. She could directly poke Luo Nan's mouth. Let's talk a bit more practical. According to what you said, you're prepared to make everyone wait for a few hundred to 1,000 years? I'm being very practical. This work has actually already begun. Luo Nan spread his hands. The inner world has always been conducting related exploration and research. It's just that it's relatively scattered. Or perhaps it's better to say that they haven't found a relatively clear road mark. Comparatively speaking, Deep Blue is doing quite well. The direction is very clear, and the reference is very clear. It's just that they're a bit stingy in copying. Why do I feel like there's a hidden meaning behind your words? In short, you've only taken a few chestnuts. What gives you the right to summarize? Luo Nan had no choice but to change his words. What I mean is that from the looks of things, it's impossible for us to accomplish everything in one go. We need to reorganize the lowest levels of cultivation and form a completely error-free hierarchical system. We need to do this step by step. We need to start with the levels that we can basically control. First, we need to cut down as much as possible. Then, we use the interaction between high and low levels to push back with structural thinking. We need to solidify the hierarchical foundation. We need to use the direction and results of the leap as verification. We need to try and correct the mistakes and omissions of the past. We need to move forward one step at a time. Zhang Yingying muttered, where did you learn these watertight *T excuses? Though Luo Nan said this, Zhang Yingying was able to roughly understand that Luo Nan's words were actually a highly generalized strategic direction. It was precisely because Luo Nan's generalization lacked quantitative and qualitative indicators that it sounded very general. Her Majesty Empress Wu would sometimes say something like this. Of course, Empress Wu was an extraordinary. She was a veteran power of the inner world. Even the generalization did not sound empty. In any case, one could fill in the blanks with one's imagination. As for Luo Nan, well, it seemed like he was pretty much the same right now. Chapter 966. Zhang Yingying rolled her eyes. She felt that she could not let this person be too mature and affect the results. She immediately twisted words and forced logic. It's still too abstract. Is there anything more practical? You said that the inner world is messing around. When did I? Didn't you? That's what you meant. Since you said it like that, aren't you going to take out a relatively clear road sign? Or do you want us to follow in the direction of Deep Blue? Luo Nan shook his head. There's no need for that. Look at the burner. It's extremely effective on the visible level. There shouldn't be too many problems if we extrapolate from this. The prospects are very broad. However, looking at the current form of realization, it's still just an illusory tinder. Illusory? Tinder? Aha. Human body modification is a path. It's a path that cannot be avoided. However, if we can't explore the genetic level and affect the life and death of the life solvent and the logic of inheritance, there will always be regrets. Then, why don't you cut them up a bit? I think you're quite good at it. Zhang Yingying winked. She wished for the whole world to be in chaos. Unfortunately, I can't do it. Luo Nan spoke the truth. My methods are essentially illusory. They are still constructed on a conceptual model and not on a solid foundation. Can you explain it a bit more clearly? What I mean is that I still use the reverse interference effect of soul strength on the fleshly body to build an ideal model for igniting the format of fire. If there comes a day or some extreme environment where soul strength is unable to be used, then this model will collapse and fall apart. Soul strength is unable to be used? Zhang Yingying was half on the mental side, but she had no experience in this area. She could only use her own knowledge to make guesses. Are you talking about the situation before the era of distortion, before the emergence of supernatural powers? Oh. That is a space-time environment worth researching, but I won't go that far. I'm just saying that a true tinder should be under the natural framework of life, form, and soul. It should go through a cultivation-style arrangement and automatically ignite a kind of qualitative change. Of course, it certainly requires a certain external space-time environment to catalyze it. Inside and outside interfere, complementing each other. The topic had flown into outer space. How could she bring it back? I'm waiting online. It's urgent. Actually, Zhang Yingying could see that every word that came out of Luo Nan's mouth seemed to be backed up by evidence. It was more like a description than a deduction. The problem is, what you see, Uncle Luo, is something that we mortals can't see. Zhang Yingying didn't know how to continue. Fortunately, Luo Nan took the initiative to change the direction. What I'm saying is just to express one thing. The things that I'm going to talk about next are all on the applied level. They won't touch upon fundamental theoretical research. I'm unable to talk about things that I don't know. Preface, introduction, it's really long. Zhang Yingying couldn't hold back from ridiculing him. But she had to admit that after Luo Nan's lecture, basic research in the field of supernatural powers, especially the related directions, had increased quite a bit. Moreover, this guy definitely wasn't just saying whatever he wanted to say and hiding a script in his head. Trying to stir up trouble again? She had to continue playing the role of a supporting character. Alright, everyone understands. Today, Professor Luo will be lecturing on practical skills. Which aspect? Luo Nan flexed and extended 3 fingers in succession: hierarchy, structure, and ascension. Without basic logic, it's impossible to talk about hierarchy and ascension. Then I can only talk about the middle part. He withdrew his index and middle fingers, leaving only his thumb. He wiggled it twice. Right now, we can talk about how to make a fuss about structure. We can try to segment supernatural powers. We can indirectly derive them. We can carry out self-perspective and analysis methods. Zhang Yingying's gaze swept over the strongest source of light on the beach. She blinked and had an innocent expression. Professor Luo, are you going to teach us how to segment burners? Before her voice even fell, powerful curses were unleashed from all over the world, even from many regions that exceeded this scope. Luo Nan laughed. Nope. Actually, I don't recommend starting with burners or the dynamo cores. It's not because they're bad, it's because they're too good. Zhang Yingying continued to act cute maliciously. I don't understand. Luo Nan was still gesturing with his thumb. Sister Yingying, do you know about the thumbless theory? Yeah, I think I've seen it somewhere before. Luo Nan spoke neither too fast nor too slow. He had been teaching for over half a year, and his experience had grown richer and richer. He had gradually forgotten what stage fright was. This is a metaphor put forth at the end of the last century. It is said that in the process of human evolution and development, nimble hands played an extremely crucial role. The evolution of the thumb brought about a stable grasping ability, and it possessed a decisive power. However, in the current stage of human evolution, let alone the thumb, even the hands aren't that important anymore. But in that special stage, without the evolution of the thumb function, can the hairless monkeys humans really obtain their current accomplishments? A more typical example is the scaffolding outside a building when it's built using traditional methods. When the project is finally completed, the only thing people see is the skyscraper. Who would care about those steel pipes and bamboo strips? It seems like we don't really use them now. But in the last century, the century before that, without those steel pipes and bamboo strips, how could we talk about high-rise buildings? This saying is still valid in the field of supernatural power research. When we face a highly integrated result, we only know that it is necessary, but we are often unable to find its sufficient and necessary conditions. This is because the once important but now useless link has been hidden away. It has even been streamlined. We can only see high-level reality, but we can't see low-level history. We are even more unable to see the underlying structure and order within the evolution of history. So from this angle, the standard array, the configuration of the dynamo core, is too high-end. It's too streamlined. It's not suitable. It seemed to make a lot of sense. Zhang Yingying was convinced by Luo Nan. She followed his train of thought. Then what's better? How about the more basic condensation ring? Last time Luo Nan coughed again. In a certain sense, it's more condensed than the dynamo core. Zhang Yingying blinked. Did I accidentally screw the boss over? Then let's use the blood intent ring fortress. The blood intent ring. You forged it yourself. There's no problem with that. Luo Nan still shook his head. The structure of the fortress has a certain degree of integration. It's the product of an extremely high-level configuration thinking. And it leans toward the mental plane. But then again, this is a very good group order structure. Though it's forged from soul strength, the subjective thoughts are nearly chaotic after taking shape. It embodies the objective order of the mental plane. It's very rare. You can try it yourself on the mental side. Use the syncopator to do a few rounds of segmentation. It should be beneficial for grasping the logic and state of the birth and death of soul strength. Zhang Yingying patiently waited for him to finish his advertisement. Only then did she retort, "You can't do this, you can't do that. You need to find an angle to cut in, right?" Luo Nan's gaze spun around the beach and the mist of the sea. In the end, he pointed at the camera. "If you want to talk about a more suitable one, then let's continue using Brother Papercut as an example." Papercut's excited mood was no longer there after Professor Luo flipped him over again. His chest let out a thump, and he felt all sorts of mixed emotions. It was very complicated. Di Weiwu patted Papercut's shoulder and sighed. "I don't know if this is a good thing or not. Get the hell out of here, you little brat." Yes, Papercut was able to discern the main meaning of this curse. Nervous. Really nervous. "Professor Luo Yuan, please be lenient with your words." Papercut wanted to send a private message to beg for mercy, but in the end, he was too embarrassed to do so. Luo Nan, who was thousands of kilometers away, continued to speak in a logical manner. "Remember what I said before? Brother Papercut divided soul activation into two schools, the control school and the activation school. Looking at the current mainstream of cultivation, no matter how exquisite the control, it is bound to be limited by sensing ability. Its precision is limited. It is also affected by one's cognitive level. Its potential is also limited. 1 is 1. 2 is 2. Don't even mention the limitations of equipment. Brother Papercut gave me an arm guard in the past. It corresponds to precise control. It is very exquisite, but I have never used it." Luo Nan laughed as he spoke. He faced the camera and made an apologetic gesture. Next to Papercut, Di Weiwu giggled foolishly. But when he saw Papercut's twitching face, he stuck out his tongue and hurriedly closed his mouth. Actually, the path of simulating spirituality has great potential as long as I change my train of thought a bit and transform it with superconfiguration theory. It is worth researching. Today, I'll focus on this. Di Weiwu endured for a second, but he finally broke through. He reached out and poked Papercut's fat waist. "Uncle Papercut, Brother Nan says that you have great potential." Papercut still didn't speak. Only his breathing became much heavier. His eyes were wide open as he stared unwaveringly at the projection screen. However, Luo Nan didn't enter the main topic. He just gave a simple introduction to the foundation of the superconfiguration theory. It was how all things were divided into 3 levels: the material level, the life level, and the fantasy level. Within these 3 levels, the most basic material level is mainly the accumulation, nesting, and action of objective matter. It acts within the nonlinear natural chaos to give birth to life. It is the cornerstone of the level, and it is also the most common reaction environment. The highest end fantasy level has limitless upper limits. As far as I understand it, it is mainly thought and connection. With human thought as the benchmark, one's thoughts are connected to 10,000 miles. One's thoughts are beyond the heavens. This allows 2 completely unrelated things to interact with each other in accordance with the dual order of nature and the thinking of life. It represents the framework, the regulations, and the extension of order. As for the middle life level, it acts as the hub. It leads up and connects down. The most important thing is the structure. It needs to embody the unity of contradictions. It is used to support the nonlinear natural chaos and the thinking of life with a high level of order. It also needs to embody the general direction of life. Birth, growth, death, and destruction. Zhang Yingying promptly interrupted him. "Speak human language. Speak human language." Luo Nan was very innocent. There are people who like to hear it. We need to think for the majority of people. And didn't you want to talk about application? Why are you talking about theory? I need to talk about the general sequence of events. The next demonstration is to demonstrate the structural deduction and changes of the middle life level based on the general trend of the 3 major levels. I feel that this is the direction of application of soul activation with great potential. Luo Nan rolled up his sleeves in all seriousness. Zhang Yingying didn't think much of it at first, but her eyelids twitched when she came back to her senses. "You're just a mass of water vapor. Aren't you afraid of being seen through and humiliated by playing this sort of operation?" "Oh, it seems like there's nothing to be afraid of." Luo Nan's movements were rather calm and natural. Right now he really was like a magician about to perform. He extended his hand and stroked the sand beneath his feet. "Next, we'll use the logic from before on the sand table of the material level to demonstrate a few structural combinations. I'm doing my best to follow the nature of the life level. The theory I'm referring to can be simply called fantasy configuration. The basic operation and interference methods come from the techniques Brother Papercut taught me. Of course, I'll have to use the logic of fantasy configuration to edit it a bit. You don't mind, right?" "I don't mind," Zhang Yingying answered extremely straightforwardly. It was Luo Nan's turn to roll his eyes. "I'm asking Brother Papercut. I'm waiting for a private message." Luo Nan's voice had yet to fall when Papercut's confirmation arrived at the same time as Zhang Yingying's low sweep of her leg. "So fast. It seems like it's still early in the morning over at Xia City. Hee, it's because of you that their nest exploded. But then again, aren't we the lucky ones?" Zhang Yingying very maliciously changed the scene, giving a short shot of the 7 burners on the beach not too far away. Between them was the sand ball. It was so flat and bumpy that no regular shape could be seen. The sand ball represented a nervous process of adaptation. It formed a stark contrast with the casual and natural conversation over here. Luo Nan chuckled. He didn't say much. Then, he truly began his demonstration and explanation. "Right now, I'm going to use the blessing of soul strength to give this material sand table an initial condition. It doesn't matter if the individuals on it are alive or not. They must have a foundation of mutual induction and interaction. This is also the starting stance and basic principle of soul activation. Sufficient, multi-angle, and multi-level interference. Luo Nan's gaze moved downward as he spoke, and Zhang Yingying's camera followed closely. A portion of the beach by his feet suddenly darkened in color. It appeared to be a bit moist. At first glance, it looked like a bottle of water had been poured over it. A second later, the moist sand began to boil. At first glance, the sand under the camera looked like a pot of corn soup that wasn't too well colored. Because of the density of the sand, it had an extremely eye-catching viscous feeling. But then, Zhang Yingying gave a close-up shot. Everyone immediately saw that every grain of sand in this pot of viscous soup was actually relatively dry. They weren't stuck by the soup, and there was very little contact between them. This pot of sand felt more like iron sand under the action of a magnet. It was magnetized within a magnetic field, attracting and repelling each other. And when the force used exceeded a certain threshold, the sand would push against each other and gush upwards, forming an extremely tensile bubble. Soon, the bubble would burst open, returning to the lower layer, and the cycle would repeat. Zhang Yingying felt dizzy the more she watched. She couldn't help but ask, why is it like this? What are they doing? That's a very good question. Luo Nan was already standing to the side, watching with folded arms. The truth is that they're doing things to each other. Chapter 967. Luo Nan stuck a polite tail under Zhang Yingying's offensive of rolling her eyes. Then he continued to explain, the reason for this phenomenon is because I used my soul strength to bestow them with a basic and identical reaction pattern. Let me explain the logic behind this. We ultimately want to simulate the nature of the life layer, so we will make it relatively complex. However, it will be crude and random. After all, I don't know what the sand will look like after it evolves into the life solvent. I can only fabricate it out of thin air. Therefore, the structure of the blessing will be a bit abstract and conceptual. The structure embodies the focus on the reaction acuity of the individual. It increases the viscosity of the interference between them, giving them ample opportunities to react. It's a bit similar to magnets. Two forces of attraction and repulsion will form as their spatial state changes. The basic structure is like this. Luo Nan condensed water vapor as he spoke, drawing a concrete diagram in the air. The rules were unfamiliar. It was clearly the product of configuration thinking. It made the scalp of an outsider swell. Luo Nan gave it a qualitative description. This is the basic unit that we are able to divide into. Zhang Yingying mumbled, this isn't friendly. Do you need to make it so professional? Luo Nan glanced at her. There's no other way. Back then, Brother Papercut gave me the material condition of a talisman paper processed by Master Gao. It is active and has a stronger direction. What I have here is sand, so I need to do some processing in advance. Let me emphasize again, I did this rather casually. I randomly chose a reaction structure of a miniature individual and gave it a boost. This was artificially designed for the convenience of the experiment. In real life, the result of the segmentation wouldn't be so neat. Wow! Di Weiwu's eyes went perfectly round. He gasped in surprise, Uncle Papercut, so that little paper man of yours is actually this complicated. Excuse me. Papercut's words were so true that they made him cry. Luo Nan's method was indeed carried out according to the basic principle of soul activation. It was to interfere as much as possible with this basic logic. Back then, the Xia City branch had sent him to teach Luo Nan this technique because they valued it as a typical example of the interference between the mental and the material. However, normal ability users, including Papercut, would never be able to be like Luo Nan, giving every grain of sand a basic reaction pattern, no matter how meticulous they were. This was equivalent to making thousands of blessings in an instant. Even if it was simple and repeated in batches, when accumulated to a certain number, the difficulty would naturally rise to an insurmountable level. Papercut was quite self-aware. Even if he sent 10 or 100 people like him, it would be impossible for him to reach Luo Nan's level. Luo Nan, who was thousands of kilometers away, seemed to sense Papercut's state of mind. He faced the camera and spoke in a gentle tone, under the logic of soul activation. We need to do our best to provide an adequate and necessary environment. Then we will bestow the environment with regulations and the logic of sensing changes. However, this is only research. It is screening. It is a deliberately created ideal state. Even so, he might have to conduct tens of thousands of simulations before he could seek a probabilistic result. In actual combat, we definitely have to choose the simplest and most effective structure. Of course, this is within the limits of the target's own physical properties. All of this will require the accumulation of daily experiments. Luo Nan was trying to comfort her. But why did it make people want to cry even more? Papercut thought about his daily life, the handicraft shop he ran and the gaudy display cabinets for papercut craftsmanship. His entire person didn't feel good. Luo Nan turned to Zhang Yingying in the live broadcast. What do you want? Zhang Yingying was still in a dizzy state. She was stunned for half a second before waking up. Huh? I choose? Can I choose? I told you. I just gave them a basic reaction structure, giving them basic activity. As manipulators, we still need to bestow them with a few regulations. We need to give them a corresponding stimulation. It's like doing breeding experiments. We need to see how resistant the flora is to certain drugs. Now that you say it like this, I suddenly understand a bit. Zhang Yingying was a smart person. She had listened to Luo Nan's explanations and introductions several times before. She was immediately enlightened by a few specific examples. You're doing bacteria screening. More or less. It's just that we're screening superconfigurations that are built upon the foundation of tangible matter. It's a kind of incorporeal system framework. Are we looking to see who is more efficient? Well, you mean to say that we should make them a whole system, sand creatures? Yes, that's what I mean, but it's just a simulation. Simulation? You want me to be a game designer? Let me think about it. Zhang Yingying lowered her head to look at the beach. Speaking of which, the quality of the sand on Zeolite Beach was excellent. It was fine and pure. It was only when piled together that it revealed a faint golden luster. The feeling of stepping on it with bare feet should be quite good. Unfortunately, none of the people present had the leisure to do so. Zhang Yingying muttered to herself irresolutely. She simply crouched down and grabbed a handful of fine sand that hadn't received any interference from the outside of the boiling sand soup. She let it flow through the gaps between her fingers. Gradually, she got the feeling, it's a bit soft, but it's quite malleable. Maybe we need a fellow that can transform? Oh, we need to increase its stickiness and malleability. Luo Nan casually gestured in the air. He wasn't just messing around. He was making additions, deletions, and corrections based on the simple configuration of the condensation of water vapor. Illusory yet clear lines and diagrams condensed and danced on his fingertips. Don't follow his train of thought by all means. You'll die. Zhang Yingying squinted her eyes and looked a few times. Then she forced herself to return to being the client. She wholeheartedly raised her request, don't think about hardness. But we can do a bit of work on the unloading force. Luo Nan expressed his understanding, it's conductive. When necessary, it can dissipate and reassemble for a short period of time. What about the attack power? Are we going to pounce over and suffocate people to death? This can't be considered for now. The conversation on the beach continued. The style of the scene looked quite normal. However, there were a few people who were forced to watch from all over the world who resented injustice. Their emotions were provoked to become increasingly irritable and fragile. This adulterous couple. Another person slammed the table in the video conference setting. There was also a person complaining on the other side, that's sure Shinha. Did they let him do the experiment? And Hood? Didn't he know how to give a word of warning? Such a crucial camera position is wasted just like that. Of course, there was no lack of poisonous tongues among the participants. Their poisonous tongues grew stronger in their leisure time. Even if we keep it normal, gentlemen, are you sure that the normal level of your brain matches the scene of the live broadcast? The video conference nearly turned into a battle of wills. In the end, there were still some people, such as Bald Jeff and Director Mao, who grew more and more interested the more they watched. Right now, the main focus of the live broadcast was on Luo Nan. It could be seen that as Zhang Yingying's request became more and more specific, Luo Nan's water vapor configuration became more and more complex. But when the composition structure reached a certain degree of complexity, Luo Nan would begin to subtract. He would be stingy here and subtract there. After a few rounds, he would reach a relatively concise degree. Then he would begin to add layers upon layers. This is a type of optimization method. It's an extremely high-level operation. Bald Jeff made an assertion: there must be some sort of formula in the depths of his heart. It doesn't matter if it's symbolic or purely graphical. It can follow a fixed rule to offset the redundant parts and transform them. The accumulated structure can be upgraded and transformed. This is a high level of integration. A high level of evolution of knowledge. Director Mao still liked to converse with professionals. He let his secretary refill his cup of coffee, but his eyes never left the live broadcast from beginning to end. Can you see the theoretical context? Is there a concrete basis? Bald Jeff could only shrug. Perhaps Instructor Li Wei can provide a better explanation. However, did you discover anything else? It's just a guess. I feel that Luo Nan shouldn't have been exposed to it for too long. Look at him. He was a bit hesitant at first. He wasn't proficient in using it. But the more he practiced, the more fluent he became. This is the accumulation of skill proficiency. It's not something that can be explained by a so-called genius. In other words, he certainly has something to rely on. There's no need to mention the last sentence of nonsense. Director Mao swirled the cup of coffee that was half full, letting the thick black liquid imitate the small piece of boiling beach. But in the end, he didn't get any results from the swirling. In the end, he could only sigh, what a pity. There's no way to cut open his head for now. Luo Nan didn't know that there was a certain big shot extraordinary who was extremely interested in his head right now. Moreover, this wasn't really news. He made a series of calculations with full concentration. Only after 3 or 4 rounds of calculations was he barely satisfied. Right now, the condensation of the water vapor into a configuration was more or less unrecognizable. Luo Nan's gaze rotated back and forth between the configuration and the sand. It seemed that he was considering how to proceed. In the end, he said to Zhang Yingying, "You're up next." Me? In the end, they aren't living things. They're simulated spirituality. They don't have any power of their own, so they need the support of external energy. Plus, I still need to maintain a bit of objectivity as much as possible. Zhang Yingying blinked her eyes. She was a bit eager to give it a try, but she was still worried. Can I do it? Isn't this operation a bit too meticulous? Relax. The framework is set up. You're just a human-shaped battery. Zhang Yingying gave Luo Nan the middle finger outside of the camera, but she still obediently followed Luo Nan's instructions. Step by step, she carefully took over the control. During this time, Luo Nan gave the sand a second round of support. He made adjustments to their initial reaction framework. Every time he carried out a fine adjustment, he would list the relevant configuration changes in the air in the form of condensation of water vapor. Okay, there weren't many people who could understand this, but the attitude was there, right? At the same time, he encouraged Zhang Yingying, "Don't be nervous. I told you that they already have a set pattern. You don't need to expend any effort at all. You just need to maintain a stable output of energy." "Oh, you can even experience it up close," Zhang Yingying exclaimed in the next second. "Wow." Chapter 968. Zhang Yingying's facial expression wasn't shown in the live broadcast, but the curiosity of nearly everyone in the audience turned into cat claws as she cried out. They stuck out from their throats, digging into their throats. Luckily, there were a few people who could probe at close range. The group of friends were all clamoring. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Tell me. What does it feel like? Zhang Yingying's eyes were closed. Unfortunately, the camera wasn't pointed at her. It was just focused on the sand that was still in a boiling state, as well as the slender white fingers that were suspended above the boiling sand pit. Right now, the fingers were faintly trembling and moving. It was as if they were lightly stroking something. It seems alive. It's very coarse. It looks like it has fluff. What is this? Papercut began to doubt life. His scalp was splitting. Di Weiwu was incessantly annoying him to the side. Uncle Paper, what is Sister Yingying saying? Why don't you take out a paper man and let me give it a try? There were also some people suspected that Zhang Yingying was doing this on purpose. She was exaggerating, singing a two-man show with Luo Nan. However, the two people in the live broadcast didn't pay attention to these things. Luo Nan had a very amazed appearance. Your senses are quite exquisite. Your support is quite strong as well. The characteristics of this ability are very suitable for nurturing. Speaking of which, you should partner with Brother Papercut to make a petri dish or something. How did you derive the ability White Rainbow? Huh. Most of Zhang Yingying's mind was in the sand pit under her hand. It went in one ear and out the other. She only became more excited. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Tell me what to do next. Oh, let me adjust it a bit. I'll do my best to fit the characteristics of your ability. TSK, the effect will exceed expectations. The sand in the sand pit was already converging as Luo Nan spoke. It was no longer the cyclic and inflating bubbles. Instead, it formed an undulating mucous membrane. Truthfully speaking, the appearance of the sand pit was ugly. It lacked beauty. But Zhang Yingying's specific senses told her that there was another situation. The innumerable grains of sand still maintained their basic absorption and repulsion powers. But in a more complex reaction mode, some of them began to cluster and accumulate layer by layer, separating themselves from the other sand particles in the sandpit and forming a separate entity. Zhang Yingying's perceptual penetration was blocked by these clumped sand accumulations. Actually, it was not blocking, but the overall activity pattern of the aggregated sand had already derived extremely complicated details. It was so complicated that Zhang Yingying could not grasp it at all. She could only observe a general behavior pattern. How interesting. Zhang Yingying had already begun to discover a considerable amount of interest. It was as if she was playing some kind of nurturing or management game. In fact, there were indeed such works on the market. But when this model was brought into reality and touched with a more realistic and comprehensive perception, every moment seemed to have a breathtaking change in the details. The more sensitive one's perception was, the more inconceivable stimuli one could gather. Zhang Yingying devoted all her attention to it. No matter what, she wanted to know to what extent this pile of sand that had just taken shape would develop. Yes, let's give it a name. Let's call it Sand Demon Number 1. Oh, okay. Luo Nan simply responded. Next, Qi. A powerful disintegrative force descended from the sky, causing Sand Demon Number 1 in the sandpit to disintegrate in an instant, returning it to its original state. The several centometers that descended with the disintegrative force also completed their mission. They flew up once more, revolving around the sandpit and humming. Sigma, O_O winky face. What are you doing? Zhang Yingying was really frightened. She was stupefied there for at least 3 seconds. She stared at Luo Nan with wide eyes when she understood what had happened. Her voice rose by a notch. Centometers and cheating. Huh? Zhang Yingying really could not imagine that Luo Nan could speak of this matter in such a righteous and confident manner. Luo Nan was indeed righteous and confident. He began to record the configuration state of Sand Demon Number 1. He condensed it into a state of water vapor and let it float in the atmosphere. Then he wrote down the composition and structure of the centometers as they displayed their effects, including the direction and techniques of soul strength interference. Since Luo Nan lacked a concise symbol system, he could only make intuitive descriptions that were similar to geometry. Therefore, the writing on the blackboard took up a lot of space. Soon, it occupied a considerable area. The entire set was quite taxing on the eyes of the audience. But for ability users who lacked the concept of centometers, this was clearly a rather intuitive user manual. At the very least, it was like that. The human brain would always produce a few adorable illusions. Some people would think, right now, I'm just missing a set of centometers. Luo Nan did not explain too much about how to use the centometers. Right now, his main direction of work was within the sandpit. Yes, at the same time, he needed to appease the human battery. I said before that we need to simulate the nature of the living layer. But if you think about it, you know that there's no way to make this sand evolve into a true living substance. For example, to create silicon-based life and the like. Therefore, it's just a simulation. In the beginning and end conditions, we'll artificially choose the corresponding characteristics and strengthen them. In this way, its foundation is still illusory. We can only do our best to make it a bit more stable at the higher levels. So what? Zhang Yingying was still brooding over the sudden death of Sand Demon number 1. You just need to continue simulating it. The problem is that we don't have time. Right now, it's just a demonstration. It's not a real experiment. We need to take care of the effects of the demonstration. Zhang Yingying clicked her tongue twice. Who are you mocking when you say these words? Luo Nan spread his hands. What I mean is this. Fast forwarding, in other words, cheating, is inevitable. This is because I already know that there are some super configurations or system frameworks that are more effective than the one just now. It's just that our luck isn't good. We didn't encounter the probabilistic result during the natural combination process of the sand. We could only start over. Perhaps this is a bit more humane than watching them naturally collapse after accumulating layer upon layer. Or perhaps, do we need to demonstrate the natural collapse situation? Zhang Yingying was a bit startled, but she didn't say anything in the end. She just pursed her lips and became an emotionless human battery. Oh, Petri dish might sound a bit better. Regardless of whether or not Zhang Yingying got over it, Luo Nan really did pay attention. In the end, he demonstrated the natural collapse situation once. It was a relatively long and tedious process. The tens of thousands of sand particles within the sandpit were attracted or repelled by the squeezed mass of sand particles. They adjusted their body angles over and over again, gradually forming pieces of glued bodies. The glued bodies began to interact with each other, colliding, and even devouring each other. It was like a chaotic battle between many nations. They were no longer satisfied with the space limitations of the sandpit. They began to expand to the outer regions. The ordinary sand particles, which originally didn't possess the support of the configuration, were drawn into the chaotic battle between the nations to strengthen their respective strengths. However, maybe because the excessive amount of normal sand diluted the power of the configuration enhancement, or maybe because there was a bug in the internal system structure, when the pot of boiling sand was about to be unified and Sand Demon number 2 was about to appear, the devastating collapse came like a sudden plague. Zhang Yingying was stupefied as she watched the sand particles rapidly lose all vitality and completely collapse. She subconsciously raised her hands. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything wrong. We can prove it to each other. The problem lies in the fact that the sand made too many wrong choices. Do you understand now? Zhang Yingying directly changed the topic. She gave him a sideways glance. Can you have a little bit of self-awareness? How many people can understand the lesson you're teaching? Oh, really? Let fate decide. Luo Nan laughed, his eyes squinting. Zhang Yingying was a bit startled, but she didn't say anything in the end. Luo Nan didn't talk much during the relatively long and tedious demonstration of natural collapse, but he wasn't idle. He was constantly observing the sandpit, the restless accumulation of sand particles. He was constantly recording and updating the meaningful system framework formed from tens of thousands of random combinations of simple configurations. The surrounding area where he stood was a beach where fog and seawater intersected. It was practically covered in diagrams formed from condensed water vapor. They were affected by the refraction of light. They were faint to the point of being non-existent. Sometimes they were extremely dazzling. Zhang Yingying didn't even dare to rashly move her position right now. Otherwise, she might destroy the writing on the blackboard next to her. Luo Nan wasn't just a recorder. He would give a simple explanation every time the recording was updated. He let the people watching the live broadcast know what kind of turning point the ecology of the sandpit was at. Sometimes he would even give a simple explanation of the corresponding structure. He would explain its advantages and disadvantages, as well as the possible direction of further transformation. This demonstration of natural collapse lasted for nearly an hour. It was longer than all of the previous live broadcasts combined. However, the reactions of the audience watching the live broadcast were quite good. Many people watched with keen interest. It was hard to imagine that ordinary sand could form such an interesting and coordinated performance after a simple reaction mode was set up. Most importantly, many people were able to see configuration content that was 10 times, 100 times richer than what they had accumulated in the first half of their lives. There was also the relevant knowledge of segmentation and combination. It must be known that ever since Professor Luo's public lecture half a year ago, configuration theory had become the most popular theories in the inner world along with the cage theory on the mental plane. Compared to the cage theory, configuration theory was only publicly known in 3 domains that could be researched on a large scale: the burner, the condensation ring, and the blood intent ring. The scope of research was quite narrow. There were also people who tried to extract configurations from their own cultivation experiences to conduct research, but most of them were unsuccessful. But today, Luo Nan was simply selling his configurations on a sale. Even if it was a framework structure that was destined to fail, and the vast majority of configurations had flaws of one sort or another, there would always be a bit of a marvelous and resplendent flash of light. As for which was the true flash of light, that was up to the individual to decide. Chapter 969. After comforting Zhang Yingying, no, after the experimental proof of natural collapse, the cheating demonstration experiment began again, and the progress of the experiment was suddenly accelerated. Correspondingly, the configurations displayed and the grander framework structures became more and more abundant, and they were replaced more and more frequently. A portion of people gnashed their teeth in anger when faced with such a large amount of information. A portion of people were infatuated and intoxicated. A portion of people were secretly delighted. But in the eyes of a few people, to be clear, in Zhang Yingying's eyes, Luo Nan looked a bit darkened. Luo Nan, who had entered an experimental state, was like a callous creator. He mobilized the countless possibilities of the fine sand community, nurturing it into a nearly living reaction. But then he extinguished it one by one like he was strangling an ant. He only kept a few possible branches and let them go again, causing the vitality in the sandpit to appear again. When it reached a certain level, he wiped it out again. He repeated the cycle again and again, strengthening and inheriting the configuration framework he needed. Well, Zhang Yingying knew that this was a very normal artificial selection of experimental pathways, and it was widely used in many scientific research fields. And Luo Nan's operation was extremely calm, precise, and on point from start to finish. There was absolutely no excessive behavior that violated scientific ethics. But she was a petri dish. All the products that simulated spirituality appeared in the sandpit. Even if they were temporary, shouldn't she put in effort and emotion? There were times when reason was not worth mentioning in front of emotions. Zhang Yingying endured round after round. In the end, she really could not hold it in any longer and began to quarrel with Luo Nan. It was one-sided. That's enough. I think this is good enough. Still not enough? You've already destroyed 30 rounds. Don't you have an answer? Can't we just copy him in the first round? Hey, are you listening to my opinion? This is too much. Utensils, I'm not playing with you anymore. Luo Nan jabbed down with an extremely callous finger just as his voice fell. Sand Goblin number 33 within the sandpit was just like its many predecessors. It suffered a calamity of total annihilation. It nearly swelled to the point of bursting out of the sandpit before collapsing and disintegrating. Zhang Yingying was so angry that she leaned back. She wished she could jump up and choke Luo Nan's neck. Maybe I can bear with it a little longer? At this moment, a buzzing sound lingered in his ears. The centometers rose into the air again as usual and stared coldly at the life embers in the sand pit. Luo Nan was like this as well. But his line of sight drifted away half a second later. It seemed to be looking at the writing on the blackboard he had left behind earlier. It also seemed to be piercing through the moisture in the air to point towards the misty ocean. But soon, he turned his gaze back and smiled at Zhang Yingying. That's enough. Ah. Zhang Yingying was stunned. When she looked into the sandpit again, she saw that the sand that had just collapsed began to squirm strangely. Yes, squirming. It was impossible for a single grain of sand that had already disintegrated to display such a state. The reason for such a visual effect could only mean that there was an invisible network between the grains of sand that was connected in succession and conducted successively. Due to the existence of this invisible vein, Zhang Yingying very naturally ignored the common gaps between the sand grains, and regarded the existence in the sand pit as one. From the looks of things, it seemed that the sand had been broken up into 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. The amplitude and frequency of the squirming of each piece was a bit different. Was it affected by the size of the split? But once these split pieces came together, the slight difference disappeared. In the time it took to take 3 to 5 breaths, there was only one frequency left in the sand pit. One pattern. It squirmed, twisted, and occasionally rolled. It slowly gathered together, drawing a boundary with the inactive sand at the edge of the sand pit. It looked like a somewhat lively fat snake. Well, it was also like seawater that flowed along a hidden channel on the beach. It wrapped around the grains of sand and followed a fine trench that was invisible to the naked eye. It gradually crossed the boundary of the sand pit and flowed in a meandering fashion on the even more expansive beach. Zhang Yingying's breathing became shallow. Her gaze followed the pile of sand on the beach for a long time. It seemed that even her breathing would become one with its squirming frequency. Sand Demon number 33. Luo Nan recorded the relevant configuration frame in the air as he answered, it can be considered a creation that conforms to the experimental goal. Basically. Conforms to the goal? What's the goal? Zhang Yingying had long since become muddle-headed from the large amount of information and the inexplicable emotions. Right now, she could only painstakingly recall and demonstrate the preset regulations before carrying out the experiment. Viscosity, plasticity, conductivity. As well as the mechanism of temporary decomposition and remodeling during high-risk times. Luo Nan casually reminded her. He wrote more and more on the blackboard at this time. Many of the special configuration features required large amounts of schematic conversion in order to be realized. And the condensed water vapor patterns floating around him were far too dense. In the end, he simply blew out a mouthful of air to clear the area around him. Only then was he able to continue. Holy crap. He really wiped. Don't. I haven't finished watching yet. Screenshot party laughs but doesn't speak. Rip-off party gently caresses the dog's head. Retard kneels. Great God, please link. The link is here. Double-click to like it, dear. Luo Nan's excessively casual actions created a chain of chaos in the many cyberspaces of the world. Well, the blackboard writing on the beach really was becoming more and more chaotic. Large amounts of diagrams were recorded. They floated in the air in the form of condensed water vapor. Their structures could be considered stable, but they were far too light. A gust of sea breeze could blow them away. So much so that a considerable portion had already left the camera. Some were even submerged in the pervasive mist of the seaside. This made those configuration researchers who truly wanted to learn beat their chests and stomp their feet. But before they had the time to howl in grief, Luo Nan's follow-up writings and explanations arrived. The seemingly concise yet extremely complex diagrams and the corresponding conversion and deduction process were like a soul-sucking monster. They firmly hooked their attention, finding it hard to loosen their focus even a bit. Luo Nan mainly explained Sand Demon No. 33's basic regulations. Based on the characteristics of the sand, he added secondary regulations to it through a configuration method. These were the things he warned Zhang Yingying about. All these regulations cannot be created out of thin air. They must be derived and extended according to the physical properties of the sand. The substrate is sand, and this is how it is. Changing the substrate requires a change in appearance. That is, the forces on the material plane are magnified in terms of the configuration concept. They accumulate layer by layer, ultimately establishing a passage from the material plane to the imaginary plane. Of course, this passage is hidden. A certain accumulation of conditions must be met before it can be opened. There must also be some margin for self-adjustment. This is a kind of regulation that imitates the laws of nature. It is also a display mode of mutual interference. It can be considered a key point related to the design. Luo Nan's explanation was quite on point under the layer upon layer of freshness. It caused a considerable portion of the live broadcast audience to be unable to extricate themselves. Even if they didn't understand, they could still feel that they had gained a great deal, right? But Zhang Yingying, who was close at hand, basically treated it as nothing. Most of her attention was focused on the body of Sand Demon No. 33. This creation, which she didn't know how to accurately define, crawled out of the sandpit and did a stretch of movement. It appeared to be a bit hesitant. Zhang Yingying was hesitating as well. Her camera lens swayed back and forth between Luo Nan and Sand Demon No. 33. This caused the minds of the live broadcast audience to be torn apart once more. A portion of the impatient people who preferred the material existence had already begun to curse. What the hell are you talking about? Give me a close-up view. Is that thing alive? I don't understand a thing at all. I just want to see a sand sculpture. No, I want to see a sand demon. Of course, the longer one looked, the more one would discover. Sand Demon No. 33 lived up to expectations. The more focused the camera was, the more obvious the range of its movements became. It quickly passed its hesitation period at a location a bit far away from the edge of the sandpit. It began to crawl back, or was it flowing? It was really hard to use an existing framework to describe Sand Demon No. 33's mode of movement. However, this didn't affect its movement at all. At first, Zhang Yingying believed that this fellow would display a certain fondness towards its birthplace, the sandpit. But reality proved that this wasn't the case. At the edge of the sandpit, Sand Demon No. 33 would sometimes crawl and flow in a large range. A portion of its body would slide down the irregular edge of the sandpit. However, it would soon increase the frequency of its wriggling, driving its entire body to accelerate and escape. It seemed to be a bit repulsive. But it continued to move along the edge of the sandpit. It had nearly made a small circle in a few breaths of time. Yes, it was heading towards Zhang Yingying. Even as an energy provider, Zhang Yingying was constantly monitoring Sand Demon No. 33. But when this fellow passed by her, she still subconsciously extended her hand to touch it to get a more realistic tactile experience. She did touch it. Unexpectedly, it was a little cool and smoother than she imagined. The first feeling she got was not the coarse feeling of sand piled up. Most importantly, when she extended her finger over and made contact with Sand Demon No. 33, half a second later, the latter's flowing body clearly caved in and deformed to avoid her touch. Oh! Zhang Yingying let out a short gasp. Even she didn't quite understand the tactile sensation at that moment, and how it felt. Zhang Yingying didn't do anything else. Just like that, Sand Demon No. 33 flowed under her finger and successfully circled around the sandpit. It headed towards the front of the beach where the waves were crashing against it. Zhang Yingying was stunned for a few seconds before she zoomed in on her finger. She could see that there were only a few grains of fine sand stuck to her finger. It looked like the new sand that sand demon number 33 had stuck to it as it crawled and flowed. It was because of Zhang Yingying's actions that more and more people came to a realization. They grasped a plausible line of logic. Zhang Yingying was Luo Nan's designated energy provider. She was the direct controller. The controller possessed the right to control. Sand demon number 33 didn't seem to be obedient. The conclusion was, the strange existence on the beach seemed to be an uncontrollable automaton. This was terrifying. Of course, the holes in people's imaginations were even more terrifying. Oh my God. This thing has its own consciousness? It's alive? Is it really creating life? Chapter 970. Creating life? Clearly. That shouldn't be the case. Zhang Yingying knew very well that sand demon number 33, who was currently crawling on the beach, didn't have any power of its own. All of its energy source was provided by Zhang Yingying. However, after being electrified, this unique existence, not only did it appear to be autonomous on the outside, but its internal structure also clearly possessed a kind of cohesive gravitational force. One could even say that it was vitality. It was like the instinctive suction and desire of life, constantly seeking for more energy to support itself. Zhang Yingying unconsciously gave more energy. Hey! Restrain yourself. Huh? Zhang Yingying raised her head in a daze and saw Luo Nan frown. He extended his hand to point at her. Your consumption is a bit large. It doesn't have any restraining mechanism. Mind your own business. Though she said this, Zhang Yingying still controlled herself for a bit. A bit. Zhang Yingying had every reason to be excited. After the initial shock and chaotic period, she was now the one who single-handedly cultivated sand demon number 33. Petri dish. Her current sense of accomplishment was brimming. But on the other hand, it was just as Luo Nan said. Sand demon number 33 didn't have any restraining mechanism. Zhang Yingying couldn't control anything other than the energy supply. It seemed to have its own goal. After bypassing the sandpit, it advanced all the way to the front of the beach. It crawled further and further, as if it wanted to crawl all the way into the sea. Zhang Yingying was a bit uncertain. She raised her head and asked Luo Nan, "What is it doing?" Luo Nan didn't answer. Even his lecture was interrupted. He just stared at the writing on the blackboard near him. It was as if he had entered a long examination. Perhaps he wanted to obtain an answer from it? Zhang Yingying was a bit flustered. She unconsciously raised her voice, "Even you don't know?" Only then did Luo Nan come back to his senses. "What?" Zhang Yingying laughed in anger. She pointed at sand demon number 33, which was about to flow into the sea. "Did you create this to let it go into the sea?" "Oh, it's most likely incapable of doing so." Before Luo Nan's voice could fade away, a fine wave pushed along the front of the beach, smearing the coastal beach into a dark brown color. A portion of the wave just so happened to reach that position. It made brief contact with sand demon number 33. In the next second, sand demon number 33's body shrunk by a size. Aya. Zhang Yingying was so shocked that she stood up. As a human battery, she immediately sensed that sand demon 33's energy requirement had dropped, which meant that its overall active structure had weakened. It was shaved by the waves. Sand demon number 33 showed its sluggish side. It stood there in a daze without any follow-up reactions. Zhang Yingying stomped her feet anxiously. She wanted to rush over, but Luo Nan took a step forward and reached out to grab her. Objective. Guessed my ass. Let me go. Even if you do you know how to get it back? Quack. Are you sure you won't cut it in half if you reach out? There's a pile of sand over there. _NH_NH, then what should we do? Luo Nan went, and replied cautiously, how about we first observe? Oh no. His chest had suffered a heavy blow from Zhang Yingying. He could feel the cold aura of the white rainbow in front of him. They were separated by 2 layers of skin. Luckily, Sand Demon number 33 finally reacted at this time. It began to crawl once more, and its direction was clear. It was heading in the opposite direction of the shoreline. The next wave chased after it, but it missed by a hair. Yeah. Zhang Yingying waved her arms and cheered, "Well done. Calm down. Calm down." Luo Nan felt that Zhang Yingying had sunk in a bit. This wasn't good. But it was useless to say anything right now. He wasn't even the focal point. Zhang Yingying had forgotten herself. She completely treated Sand Demon number 33 as the main character of the live broadcast. The camera followed it from beginning to end, not deviating from it in the slightest. Sand Demon number 33 worked hard. It seemed that it had finally discovered the fatal threat of the sea. It began its journey of escape, moving farther and farther away from the sea. It didn't look back. However, it didn't turn back the way it came in a rush. Instead, it moved at an obtuse angle and vaguely headed in Luo Nan's direction. Frankly speaking, its speed wasn't slow. Zhang Yingying estimated that the length of this fellow's body was changing between 20 to 30 centimeters. And the distance it flowed, per second was a bit longer than its body length. And it seemed to be continuously increasing. This speed was approximately 100 meters per hour. It's already surpassed most ants. Not bad. Zhang Yingying also noticed that Sand Demon number 33 seemed to have naturally extended a new mechanism as it moved forward. Its moist body possessed a certain amount of tension. It seemed to be endlessly absorbing and gathering more fine sand in the area it passed through in order to expand its body size. It probably needed to replenish itself after being shaved by the sea. Zhang Yingying was already used to using a life perspective to think about it. But then again, Sand Demon number 33's behavior was a bit like its many predecessors that had died tragic deaths. It was rather worrying. But soon, Sand Demon number 33 proved that there was a certain reason why it was able to resist the cruel Luo clan screening and survive until now. When its body size expanded, it affected the rhythm and speed of its wriggling. In other words, when it reached a certain saturated state, its fat body would produce a slight repulsive force. The effect of unifying its body was like a layer of isolation membrane. It made it hard for the fine sand in the area it passed through to adhere to it no matter what. In the beginning, Sand Demon number 33 didn't seem to be aware of this. It continued to increase the frequency of its activity. Even the tumbling motion of this fat body increased by several times. It was clear that it hoped to continue increasing its body size. However, it rolled over and over again, rolled over and lost again. Zhang Yingying watched and watched. Then she burst into laughter. Her previous worries vanished like smoke in thin air. This bro was really stupid to the point of crying. Could it be that it was able to live until now because of its stupidity? Many people in the live broadcast audience had the same reaction as Zhang Yingying. But Luo Nan didn't laugh. He even nodded in the end. Its desire-driving end has already taken shape and has begun to display its effects. But it receives the protection of the basic structure end. It's the same as eating and vomiting at the same time. It won't suffer from indigestion or excessive obesity. Currently, it has developed both ends, and it has realized two-way interference. It's a very healthy mode. Zhang Yingying smirked. If you say it's healthy, then it's healthy. But what about its IQ? Your request is a bit excessive. Luo Nan finally laughed. His gaze swept over a few more times. It's hard to say for its IQ. Its experience end seems to be accumulating and taking shape. Just as he spoke, Sand Demon number 33 seemed to have truly learned a few lessons from its many failures. The meaningless tumbling of its flowing fat body clearly lessened. Its forward speed slowed, and soon it came to a complete stop. There was still a distance of 2 to 3 meters between it and Luo Nan right now. It stayed in its original spot like this, but its body actually collapsed. It inexplicably began to flatten out, extending in all directions. The relatively stable core mass began to flatten out, nearly merging into one with the slightly undulating surface of the beach. Zhang Yingying was completely unable to understand. What's wrong? Is it so depressed that it's lying on the ground? Don't add drama to it. It's still an internal drama. Depression is an extremely advanced psychological mechanism. It doesn't have this material foundation yet. Luo Nan maintained a calm and bored state of research. He casually added a portion of content to the blackboard that was already unbearably crowded. It's sensing. It's receiving more information. You should be able to sense more energy consumption. Yep, it's an active sensing mode. It's similar to reaching out and touching. Of course, it's probing out grains of sand. This is already a type of ability. Its configuration transformation structure is like this. Luo Nan gave a few simple explanations, but Zhang Yingying wasn't interested in any of this. I just want to know. What will it do next? When the desired drive takes form, it will possess the ability to act autonomously. All of its actions will start from the perspective of survival and reproduction. Of course, we didn't add in the hereditary factor when we set up the rules. Therefore, its actions are easier to guess. Survival? Zhang Yingying seemed to understand something. Obtaining energy? It looks quite like it. So I suggest that you don't feed it too much. This is a very crucial period of growth. If it forms a habit of being lazy and gluttonous during this period, it won't be easy to change it. Zhang Yingying gave Luo Nan a hygiene ball for free. But then she gritted her teeth and controlled the amount of energy she poured into Sand Demon number 33 to the initial standard. Sand Demon number 33 collapsed more and more. It simply looked as if all the water in its body would seep into the sand. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Zhang Yingying couldn't help but worry. Is there really no problem? Its configuration transformation is orderly, and this is also a kind of energy-saving state. At the same time, it's increasing its contact with the external environment. What do you mean? It obtains information and makes a response. Then it sees which response has the most substantial effect. It can obtain more positive feedback. In other words, it can be simply said that it's making a judgment. Zhang Yingying was shocked. Does this stupid bro really have a brain? Your way of speaking is far too loose. It absolutely can't reach the level of a highly intelligent life form. However, your perspective of observation is also problematic. You can't directly regard this pile of sand as an individual, just because it has a unified behavior pattern. In the end, it is still a kind of accumulation of tens of millions of special sand particles acting on each other. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to view it as a hive of bees, a nest of ants, a flock of birds, or a school of fish. Or perhaps it's between a colony and an individual. Luo Nan blinked. This is the special quality of a super configuration. Please. Don't lecture me. Zhang Yingying raised her hand to beg for forgiveness. What I mean is that it's pitifully simple as a whole response pattern. It can only do what you saw at the beginning. If you view this as one, then one is one. There are no other possibilities. Luo Nan pointed at the symptom floating in midair as he spoke to this point. But if you take this one, and split it into even finer and simpler patterns. As long as the simple patterns that are split out still possess the meaning of configuration, then one is 1,000, and one is 10,000. And if they are able to possess an efficient and common method of communication between them, then the combined configuration patterns between them will be innumerable. The innumerable combined configuration patterns will bring about endless possibilities. The possibilities rapidly expand and accumulate. Inconceivable characteristics will emerge from within them when the magical probabilities display their effects. Yes. This is precisely the importance of symptom. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.